All right, committee, we're going to go ahead and get started so we can get through the items on today's agenda. The first item, are there any bill introductions this morning? All right, seeing none, we'll go ahead and move on to the informational hearings that we have. And so first, I'll invite Robert Stewart, the Executive Officer for the Kansas Bureau of Investigation, and he's going to be giving us an update on the Pittsburgh Regional Crime Center. Robert.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name's Bob Stewart. I'm the Executive Officer for the KBI. Thank you for the opportunity to come and talk to you today about Pittsburgh State and KBI and our project down there that is going to be a regional crime center and laboratory. You will see in my PowerPoint slide, and you've heard us talk at different times about what the name of this place is, and we've bounced back and forth about what we're calling it. We still don't know exactly the words we're going to put on the side of the building. As you all know, Director Mativi is soon to take a position on the federal bench, so I was thinking maybe we call it Tony's Towers. If we're going to go that direction, quite frankly, we should rename the road to Anderson Avenue because Representative Anderson was instrumental in helping us initially talk about this project and move forward with it. So with Representative Anderson's permission, we may move forward in that direction. But seriously, about 3 years ago, for those of you that weren't on the committee, 3 years ago, when the director came on board, one of the first things he was briefed about was our facilities problem in the southeast corner of Kansas in Pittsburgh. We were in a lease situation, and it was in a very bad old building. Some of our very expensive scientific equipment was in a place where we couldn't keep hot or cold, so the temperature varied, which meant that humidity and moisture was getting into those machines. We didn't have the correct space for our agents, and nor did we have any sort of security there. And finally, we didn't have any room to grow. At the same time, Director Mativi met with President Shipp, who was the president of Pittsburgh State at the time, and discussed that problem, and the two of them discussed a program that has currently worked for 12 years now, and that's what you're all familiar with, our lab on Washburn University's property. That's a great joint program that benefits both the KBI and Washburn and students in the state of Kansas. The lab building is owned by us, but the land is owned by Washburn University, and we lease it from them. We have a joint facility there where our lab works, but there is also Washburn University laboratory space. We have an internship program there where we believe something between 16 and 20 interns over the years have gone on to become KBI scientists. So that's the program that we were thinking about modeling what we're doing at Pittsburgh State after. And Pittsburgh State immediately agreed, President Shipp immediately agreed, and enthusiastically that the university has continued to be a partner in what we're doing down there. So with that, I'll move along here. Which button am I not hitting? Okay. Here are just some renderings that we originally were showing. It's at the end of the day, it's going to be a two-story facility sitting in the southeast corner of university property, besides some other facilities that I'll talk about a little bit later. Again, the history of the project has been one that's relatively short. Only 3 years ago, we first came to you and discussed moving forward with the Regional Crime Center laboratory, and we started talking with partners about what that might look like. Of course, the first partner was Pittsburgh State University. Here's some of the general project facts. It's a 53,000 square foot planned facility. It's on Pittsburgh State's campus on what they call their research park area. It's going to be a hub for public safety operations and higher education collaboration. $42 million project in total, but there's an $8 million federal influx of funds that I'll talk about more in a little bit. The groundbreaking was last September. Construction began this October, and we believe it's going to be finished and ribbon cutting in January or February of next year. So our timeline's pretty aggressive, but we're moving forward well. As I mentioned, the previous space we were in, we didn't have enough space for folks. And it was so bad that we've already gotten out of that, and our partners and our friends at Pittsburgh State are now currently providing a space for both our agents and our lab folks that are there. We currently have 2 scientists down there, 1 administrative assistant, and probably 13 or 14 other personnel total right now that are in two spots. They're in a building that's right in the middle of campus, and they're also in what's called the Tyler Research Facility, which is where our lab folks are at right now. So again, that cooperation with our partners has been pretty extraordinary. At the end of the day, what we expect to have from a KBI footprint in this building is going to be 25 KBI people. 6 agents or analysts in the child victims unit. As some of you recall, several years ago, we recognized that the KBI was not addressing the growing problem of child sexual abuse and crimes against children in the state of Kansas. So you authorized and we set up the first child victim unit here in this part of the state. The next year, we came back and asked for that to be increased and added to the western part of the state, and we added a crime victims unit that's based out of our Great Bend office and partially in our Garden City space. And then last year we came and asked for you to help us fill out the remainder of the state, so the southeast corner, and we have now stood up a crime victims unit in the southeast corner of the state. We currently have 4 agents down there. The plan is when the new building is completed, we're going to have 6 agents in the child victim unit in the southeast part of the state with 1 assistant special agent in charge managing the program down there. We're going to have 9 other agents working other things like our major crimes, a special operations agent, 2 cyber agents, and one of our canine agents is going to be down in Pittsburgh once we're fully on board in the new facility down there. We're going to have 1 victim witness specialist called Aliva down there, and our lab, which now has 2 folks, we're expecting to double to 4 chemists and analysts down there, plus a evidence control specialist. We also will have a building maintenance person and a custodian. So the KBI footprint in the new space is going to be, we suspect, right at 25, 26 people when the day is done. Of course, in a 53,000 square foot building, that doesn't take up all the space. So we've got a lot of partners that we're talking about. Certainly the biggest partner is going to be Pittsburgh State University. They're going to have an academic presence there with lab space on the 2nd floor and some collaboration space from their perspective on the 2nd floor. But one of the big pieces is also Pittsburgh State University's police department. They currently have, the building that they were in, I think has actually been torn down, and they're in temporary space as well. So they were in old space as well. And they're going to have a big footprint in the building. They, of course, will be a 24/7 presence there. Their 911 call center will be there. Their operations work will be there. So they will provide some degree of 24-hour day, 7 days a week lights on and security out of that space as they run their day-to-day Pittsburgh State University policing operations. We also expect and know that the Kansas Highway Patrol is going to have a substation or a zone command capability out of that facility with a couple spaces there. One of the ones that initially was not part of the plan is the Kansas Law Enforcement Training Center. They had space in another place down in southeast Kansas that only in the last 18 months or so they've realized was not working for them. They came to us and asked, well, can we get involved? And we were still early enough in the planning stages that we were able to incorporate them. So KLETC is going to have a permanent presence in the facility as well. They're going to have an office space, and then they'll have access to the classroom space and the conference room space, as well as the indoor range space. So a lot of training capability that the KLETC has not had in that region, they're going to be able to use in this space as well. The Attorney General is planning on staffing 2 attorneys in the area. It's always been, I think, part of their plan, but it's been difficult for them to find space and attorneys down there, so this should make it easier for them to engage in that part of the state as well, and their plan is to have 2 attorneys down there. And of course, the Pittsburgh Police Department also will have access and use to the space in a number of ways. The Crawford County Sheriff is engaged. If you know Crawford County, the sheriff is not in Pittsburgh. He's located 20 or 30 miles to the west of there. So it's not close to Pittsburgh where a lot of their work can be. So we're providing space, and the Crawford County folks will be able to use it for an interview space or for some space where their deputies can do work as necessary when it would be easier to do in Pittsburgh rather than having to go all the way out to the sheriff's office on the far side of the county. The city of Pittsburgh will also have some capabilities in there. Our federal partners are going to have some cartelling space. They're not, I don't think any of our federal partners are planning on permanent space down there, but when they have operations in the area, we're going to have the ability and have the space set aside for them, for the FBI and the Marshal Service to run operations out of that facility as well. They'll have specifically assigned space that nobody else will have access to, that they'll be able to use when they're there. The project team is a great project team. We've had McGowan Gordon as our architects, or as our construction, PGAV as the architects. Esky and Associates has been involved helping us plan all the way through that. And of course, the one I didn't mention here is the Department of Administration and OFPM, who've been engaged with us very closely and making sure that we're doing things the way the state of Kansas rules and regulations require, and using their expertise and that the KBI doesn't have when it comes to building a building. So I wanted to shout out to them. Another rendering of a couple of things that are in there. There's going to be a big auditorium. We realized we needed that early on, as I mentioned, when we were talking with our partners down there. We called a meeting of the local sheriffs and local law enforcement leaders in the area, 50 or 60 folks all together, and we could not find a place to meet in the Pittsburgh area. It was during the academic calendar year, so a lot of Pittsburgh State University capability was already used up by their day-to-day classroom work. But Pittsburgh State found us a place to have our meeting, not in an auditorium. They have a nice theater and a nice, that we have events and things like that. We ended up having our meeting on the stage. So there was plenty of space, but we're on the stage in an auditorium having a 50 or 60 person meeting. That made it pretty clear to us that one of the things that Southeast Kansas needed from a law enforcement perspective was a place to be able to meet and have a group, a space that we could say, hey, when we need to have meetings, when law enforcement has a big event going on down here, we've got to have some space. So there's going to be an auditorium that's built into that. Of course, all of our partners will have use of it, as will Pittsburgh State, to be able to use it when they need it as well, rather than having to put people on a stage if they didn't have any place else. There's also, it's a big, nice two-story walk-in that has, I use the word vestibule. Apparently that's not right. It should be an atrium, but whichever it is, it's going to be a nice walk-in space to get into the facility in a nice, secure space. Here's a little bit of a probably now old picture from above, taken from a drone. The project right now is on time and it is on budget. And as I said, and I'll mention a little bit more late in a minute, the federal funds are inbound at some level, thanks to Senator Moran. Those federal funds we've been talking about all along. Senator Moran has been engaged with the director and with Pittsburgh State about what he could do to help the project. It just got passed here several weeks ago as part of one of the budget pieces federally. There's an $8 million tranche of money this year that now is on its way somehow to the Department of Justice, to their grant program. And the KBI right now is working, and Pittsburgh State are working with the Department of Justice grant folks to see how that money will start to come down into the project. As you all probably know, that federal money has to be specially designated. It can't be used for bricks and mortar. It has to be for equipment and training. So we're trying to work through the process of, all right, what things in our build process can we legitimately put under that $8 million tranche of money. So that's where that's at, and thanks to Senator Moran for seeing that through and bringing that money to the table. Where we're at currently, things are moving so fast. I got this slide done on Monday, submitted it on Tuesday, and it's already old. So the firing range walls are done. The underground plumbing is done. The underground electrical conduit is done. And yesterday and today, they started pouring concrete. So they are moving rapidly. I'm told that they build into these contracts a certain amount of weather delay time. So far, knock on wood, they haven't had to use much of their weather delay time. So we are really, not kidding, on time, on budget with the project. When you look at that picture, our space is in the upper right part of that picture, and you can see the firing range walls are starting to go up in the lower quadrant of that picture. The building directly to the left that's farther along, this whole research park area is really undergoing a lot of development right now. The building just to the that's to the west, is a building owned by Eagle Pitcher. Eagle Pitcher is a Joplin firm that's a defense contractor that deals with high-tech battery, advanced battery capability. That facility, the Eagle Pitcher facility that's farther along than ours, I think is going to be some of their production and testing facility for their thermal battery production. As a defense contractor, I'm not sure what that means, and I don't think I want to ask any more questions. But so that's what's going right there. Just to the west of that, which you don't see in this picture, is a new part of the Tyler project that's Pittsburgh State's alone, and that's the Tyler Prove-Out facility. The Tyler Prove-Out facility sits right beside the Tyler Research Facility, which is where we are at and where Pittsburgh State is already at. That houses the National Institute for Materials Advancement, a center down in Pittsburgh State. They do a lot of materials. They've got some scientists and some professors that are in advanced material design and development. President Newsom has called the new facility, the Prove-Out facility, the place where ideas meet industry. So that's where the guys, the scientists and the students that are coming up with the ideas actually go next door and try and figure out, can they build it in such a manner and in such a timeline and with the right amount of money to make it a product that actually would be useful and sellable in the industry. So that's what's sitting right there in that same block and a half that's being built where we're going to be sitting. So we are well positioned in that community, in that area with the right kind of folks around us. We believe that part of the project will include, part of the long-term project will include a large internship program with Pittsburgh State, not only in the science side, but also in the criminal justice side. So we believe what we're doing down there is the right thing at the right time, and we thank you for all of your support and attention over the years, and thank you for giving the opportunity to brief. I certainly won't answer any questions, but Chairman, I also have, in case there are fiscal level questions or financial questions, the CFO from the KBI, Paul Weisgerber, and the CFO from Pittsburgh State, Doug Ball, are here that can answer questions that are probably above my ability to answer. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Robert. So I know this was a collaboration between Pittsburgh State and also the KBI, and this is a bonded project.
Yes, it is.
Okay, and so my first question is, when you look at going back to one of your slides in regards to the project overview and all the key KBI partners, so we have a variety from Pittsburgh State, the police department, county, which obviously you said that the sheriff's office of Crawford County, because actually the county seat is Girard,
Okay.
and not Pittsburgh. So they're going to be having an office there. And then we also have the FBI and the U.S. Marshal Service. So to offset the bond payment, is there any leasing details for those particular partners that are going to be housed in that building?
Our current intent has not been to require any lease payment from those partners. I would say that KLETC is bringing some funding from their side regarding some of the AV equipment, some of the equipment in the range, in the classroom, and in the auditorium from their budget side to be able to supplement what we're doing.
So in regards to, aside from the $8 million that's coming from the federal government, which you said was actually for equipment and training, so you're trying to figure out how to utilize those funds in regards to the construction. So the FBI and the U.S. Marshal Service is not going to be contributing anything as far as rent or leasing options? Not
at this point, because they believe that their presence here will be relatively limited, so we're saving that space. We're leaving the option open. If, for example, the FBI decides to add what they call a resident agency, the space is moderately available, then we would charge them a lease, because that would require kind of a bigger footprint from them and a daily presence. So that certainly was in part of the communications with the Kansas City FBI SAC. They were sort of still working through their process about thinking, do they need to open a new resident agency in Pittsburgh? And right now their answer is, we don't know. So, but for our purposes, their footprint was going to be so limited, we didn't believe that a lease with the federal partners was appropriate at this point.
All right, and you had indicated construction to be completed by the end. It says to end in early 2027. Do you have an approximate month?
We're thinking late January, early February. So,
all right,
very
so just
early.
A little bit less than a year away.
Yes.
All right. Committee, any questions for Robert? All right, I'm not seeing any. Thank you, Robert, for being here and giving us an update on the project for the KBI Regional Crime Center and Laboratory in Pittsburgh. All right, committee, we're going to go ahead and move on. And the next item that we have on the agenda is, and I apologize if I meant to pronounce the name, but Haley Ordoin with the Kansas State Long-Term Care Ombudsman for the 2025 annual report. Haley.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Wimester. I am impressed. You got the last name right. Not many people get that on the first
I know my
time.
phonetics. So.
Well, I was going to say, unless you were French Cajun from Louisiana, most people don't know that. All right, members of the committee, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to be here. I feel a little bit like a fish out of different water. I'm normally in my pond of healthcare, so I'm in a bigger ocean right here with many of you, and even within my own district. So Representative Mosher is where I reside. But I am honored to be here to be able to speak to many of you about the Long-Term Care Ombudsman Program, who we are, what we do, and how we serve. If you are like many people, most people try and pronounce ombudsman, say, what on earth is that? It's a Swedish word for advocate. So we are resident advocates. We are directed by the resident, and that's probably the foremost important aspect for you to recognize. I'm not going to go through slide by slide and read off every single aspect. That's why you have this. I just really wanted to touch on key points within all of this. So this is our structure of kind of how we are. We are a completely independent agency. We do receive supportive assistance through the Department of Administration, so our human resources, our financial office, we receive assistance from them. KDADS is who our federal funds pass through. So they kind of pass through there, but again, we dictate how our funds are utilized. There's about a dozen of us ombudsmen throughout the entire state. We have about 10 volunteer ombudsmen. We had that much higher, but COVID happened and the volunteer program really took an impact. But we are spread completely throughout the state, and I'll show you a map of that here in just a minute. But what do we do? So we come in a lot. Our functions are to try to resolve any sort of problems for the residents' wishes. So we can have, anybody can be a complainant, anybody can contact us. I've spoken with several of you who have been complainants and brought us concerns of constituents, family members, friends, anyone concerned, staff members. And we try to resolve a situation on behalf of a resident or a large group of residents as a whole. We also come in and provide a lot of education on resident rights that is in the Older Americans Act. We make sure that every resident knows their rights. We're following state law, following federal law where it applies. But we do that. We come before many of you when it comes to bills and try to just bring a voice of experience of what the residents are saying, what the families are saying, what we're seeing in adult care home settings. This is a map of the state and currently how we are divided. I say currently because healthcare is constantly changing, especially that Johnson Wyandotte County, Sedgwick County. We are seeing massive increases in the Home Plus state licensed only homes. I'll explain that a little bit more if you're unfamiliar with that. But we're seeing massive increase in there, and we are hoping to, constantly change our mapping based on what the needs are so that we have a more appropriate ratio. But that is how we are divided out currently. And the very, very last page as a resource for you to take is names, contact numbers, emails, faces of our ombudsman in those areas. So if you run into issues, you're free to contact myself, and you're also free to contact your regional ombudsman for residents in that area. So this is a little bit more about services that we provide, information and assistance. If there's somebody that contacts us and it's not something that maybe we resolve or that's within our department or our jurisdiction, we refer out to anyone that can assist. We work with Kansas Department of Aging and Disability Services, KDHE, KanCare Clearinghouse, Medicare, Medicaid Inspector General, the Inspector General's office. We've done a lot of interactions, adult protective services with those different agencies too. We attend resident and family councils when we're invited to provide education to them and resources to them. We do a lot of community outreach and education. We go to different provider association opportunities, make ourselves known as a resource too. And then when we're notified by KDADs, we participate in facility surveys, complaint investigations to provide any part of our feedback or what we have experienced in those settings. And there's just a few numbers kind of at the bottom. They're in more detail here on the following pages of what those numbers this last year look like. I will tell you this is based on our federal capture year. So this is October 1st through September 30th. One thing I will reference too that not a lot of people realize we go in and attend is that bottom right square that I really don't like, and that is home closures or licensure terminations. So when a facility is found to not be compliant repeatedly by CMS, their provider contract will be terminated, and the facility oftentimes cannot afford to just sustain private pay only. It's a lot of Medicaid population, so that facility will close. We come in and let residents and their family members know what their rights are and try to assist them in finding a safe alternative placement in another home to meet their needs. And we did about 7 of those this last year. So who can make the complaints? Very often it's the resident themselves that contact us, but their representatives, guardian, power of attorney, a family member, a friend, facility staff. Like I said, that other category, you guys, we also have different departments and agencies that cross-refer. And our ombudsman program, we can make complaints ourselves if we see something that we believe impacts all residents involved. If there's, a staffing concern, abuse, neglect, exploitation, an investigation that needs to occur, I can initiate within my office a complaint to other authorities also. This is kind of our numbers a little bit of what we represent, and again, this is always changing. So 292 nursing facilities, that is your federally certified skilled nursing, long-term care, nursing facilities, the higher levels of care. And then we also have, at that time, and this is probably inaccurate itself, 538 RCCs, that is residential care communities. So that can be your assisted livings, home plus, multi-level different services. It is not just assisted living or just, low level of care needed. These communities can serve anyone and everyone. A lot of times, some populations will be age in place, And I will let you know, if you have been around healthcare long enough, which several of you on this committee have, as have I. I'm that kid that grew up in healthcare. I grew up going to the nursing home with my mom, with my grandma that worked there, lived it, breathed it for years. We are consistently seeing the trend in our state. I think I testified about this 8 years ago. The nursing facilities are declining, and the home pluses, assisted living settings, are increasing. So your state licensed only homes are increasing in number. And I'm really curious, to kind of see where that's going to go as a trend for our state, because we definitely have the need. Our state population has a very high 65 plus population. So there's a lot I think that we need to start looking at, because we should have looked at it yesterday. It's already a little too late, but we need to start looking at how we're going to care for the citizens of our state that are in the aging population. Our complaints are kind of divided up in those 4 categories. Down there, the resident rights, resident care, facility, environment and administration, and the non-facility. This is just a little bit too of the complaint types graphed out. But I wanted to provide the numbers of what those look like. They're divided out a little bit more so you can see, okay, what constitutes resident complaints? Well, that's abuse, neglect, exploitation, access to information, admissions, discharge, financials, things like that. So that you can kind of see here what constitutes those 4 different categories. And then I put in here too, just so you can kind of step into our experience, these are the common complaints that we're contacted about based in those 4 different categories. Resident rights, denying visitors, powers of attorney, guardians, facilities trying to deny that for the residents, lack of addressing pain, lack of adequate staff. I will make this preface, and I say this to pretty much every committee that I speak before. I'm often here because I get called for problems. So you're going to hear about the problems from me. But I will say, we have good and bad of everything. Are there homes out there that are doing it right? Absolutely. I could take and say a couple. I'm not going to, but there are homes that are doing it right. We are concerned more about the homes that are not doing it right, that are putting profit above the person that they're actually caring for, that are violating resident rights, violating policies. And that's who we're here really addressing. That's what our legislation is really here to address. One big thing that we constantly will bring up when we do, root cause investigations of a lot of the complaints, a lot is tied to staffing. That's a very hot topic statewide, federally. It's not a new conversation for anybody. Staffing is often at the root of a lot of the problems because needs are not being met or refusal of care, different education levels of things are occurring. Not enough staff to really meet the residents' needs. I was talking to my representative that I have, an individual lady that somehow got my personal cell phone, and that's okay, calls me like clockwork every night around 9:00 p.m. because there's no one here to put her to bed. She's constantly not going to bed. And when we have a concern along those lines, we try to resolve, we try to work with a facility, but our next step up is that we go to KDAS, Kansas Department of Aging and Disability Services, because they are the licensing authority. So it's then upon them to investigate. And I'll tell you why that's a little bit of a problem here in just a second. When we do have complaints, this is how our last year of complaint resolution has gone. So we have a 63% complaint resolution. So I'm really proud of my team. I think for the most part, more often than not, we're able to resolve this. Sometimes we get in there and we might have a complaint, say, from a family member. We always go and review it with a resident, and they'll say, no, it's just my daughter, she's kind of overbearing, I don't really have a concern. So that's where the withdrawn or no action needed applies. And then there are some that we are not able to resolve. The example I brought up about KDADs, we refer that out to the agency. They have a triage system with their complaint intake, and sometimes some of those are triaged so low that they're not reviewed until the next annual survey for that facility. Right now, in those nursing homes, that's averaging, I think last I knew, 19 to 20 months on average. So unfortunately, sometimes the resident life expectancy isn't always correlating to that, and you might have a resident pass away before that complaint is ever even investigated. This is just another slide kind of depicting what the last year of our experiences look like, so I'll leave that there for you guys. I will touch on 61 individuals subject to involuntary discharge and eviction actions. We'll go a little bit deeper into that here in just a minute. But what we face with that, very oftentimes we can get involved if the resident contacts us and resolve that. Sometimes it is lack of payment, the power of attorney's not paying, the guardian's not paying, we don't have somebody set up to help this person with their bills. And we can, oftentimes, not always, resolve that. Sometimes it's that the home is wanting to discharge to maybe not an appropriate location. We often get called after the fact by those residents, and I was discharged to a hotel for 5 days. The home is paying for that, but what after those 5 days? That's not a safe transition. What about if they need oxygen or supportive services? It's not lined up. We've had some places try to discharge to homeless shelters. Again, not really a good support system there. I've only had one time in all my years that that's been appropriate, and that individual wished to go to a homeless shelter because he was homeless prior to. He wanted to go back to what was familiar to him. And so we advocated for that and tried to set him up with all the appropriate supports. Other times it's, hey, we're just discharging them back home. Well, when you have, sweet Ethel that is maybe 100 pounds sopping wet, and her husband Gary over here, big burly guy at 250 pounds and has some confusion, it's not safe, it's not supportive. There's a reason he came into the home in the first place, and it's because she couldn't care for him. She lacked the supports needed. So that's not an appropriate discharge. So we get involved very often on those. On the long-term care side of things, we are required to be notified of those by the homes. On the state license only, we are not. So as you can see from those numbers, that's about half of the population that we're being notified on, the other half we're not. So we do believe that there's an opportunity to do some things there. I will tell you, my report was prepared prior to the beginning of session, so I apologize. You will see some things in here that are probably not even relevant time-wise anymore. Some bills that I referenced that we felt were some potential solutions that were not worked or will not be worked. I touched on the staffing here. I have a grandiose hope that we can eventually establish some safe staffing standards. Where I probably curve a little bit with some of my counterparts nationwide is that I didn't necessarily agree with the federal staffing standard. It was a place to start, but I personally feel that Home A and Home B should not have the same standards. I really feel that it should be individualized based on their population, and that population constantly changes. Some homes have what's called their case mix indexed or their functional assessment, their different screenings where they can assess the needs of the population that they're serving. I really feel it should be based on that, on what their standard for accountability and for staffing should be. So I think there's some opportunities maybe in the off season of legislation for different provider types and different organizations to really look at that for what we can do for safe staffing and even for workforce development. You'll hear, we can't regulate people into compliance for these homes and for the workforce. Well, when we talk to a lot of the nurses, CNAs, medication aides in those populations, a lot of them don't want to work in those settings because they know it's not staffed appropriately. So is it the chicken, is it the egg, which do we work to try and resolve? Hopefully we can look at a holistic approach to that. Facility initiated discharges, I kind of touched on that here a little bit. We do feel that it would be very beneficial and advantageous to the residents that we serve for the homes in all provider types to contact us to help try and resolve, to help and ensure a safe discharge. I will say probably will be coming to you guys here at some point, I believe, on the Senate Ways and Means side. And I apologize if I misspeak. I believe it's listed as Senate Bill 315 that has the budget provisos in it. There was a proviso introduced about the state licensed only involuntary discharge reporting system. I think I captured that. And what that is there right now, the state licensed only homes are supposed to be reporting their discharges to KDADS within 60 days of when the discharge occurs. So it's kind of floaty. It's not really a specific captured timeline. We did work with the provider associations, Kansas Advocates for Better Care, Disability Rights Center, to try and change some of that language, because what's been really frustrating is this was language that was supposed to have started, about a year and a half ago. And when our office is contacted, we're not contacted with every discharge. It's only if a resident contacts us on those state licensed only sides. So we shouldn't be contacted for everyone, but we also shouldn't have numbers higher than what KDADS is reporting for those captures, and we do. So we're very concerned that those are not getting accurately reported. So we've been working, and some of the proviso language was to set a very specific capture timeline, a very specific report to KDADS timeline, and then a very specific timeline for KDADS to then report that information out to the nursing facility stakeholders, license groups. Also within that, I've spoken to KDADS, and there was supposed to be an ability to enforce civil monetary penalties for homes to not report. But when that time is kind of sliding, it's really hard to capture that, I know KDADS has stated. So there's, in that proviso language, there's much more specific guidelines for that. So just kind of keep an eye on that. If anybody has questions further on that, I'm happy to address them, or even offline, have further conversations. But we really do feel that that is a huge missed opportunity right now for us to try and serve the residents of our state much better. Other systemic issues, antipsychotic medications. This is probably another conversation that's constantly brought up on the healthcare side of things is reducing that state and federally. We really feel like an opportunity that no one's really talking about, that I'm very hopeful this next legislative session and off season I can have more conversations with naturopathic physicians, would be to actually bring them into that healthcare setting, because they utilize a lot of naturopathic, non-drug interactive, non-black box interacting medication, different options and alternatives to address root cause underlying needs that might bring about certain healthcare conditions, pain levels, behavioral aspects. We see it as potentially missed opportunity that I think is worth researching more. Oops, I touched the wrong button, I'm so sorry. I would tell my teenagers this is why we can't have nice things. If you want to move forward with me, thank you. Okay, there we go. Ownership, transparency, and relations. This is something kind of on a federal level that's being looked at a lot too. We have a lot of companies out of state that own the real estate. So you'll have one company owns the real estate, one company owns the operations, one company's the management. But really, they're different names, but they're all going into the same pants pocket. But they'll say, oh no, you know, we're broke over here, but in their back pocket is their pharmacy company, is their physical therapy company, is their hospice company, and it's really all the same company. I've started conversations too with KDADs on that last bullet point, strengthening change of ownership standards, because we will see too where companies will own other states, they're based in other states, and then they'll start buying up property. And I say property because that's how it starts. They start buying the real estate, and in the meantime, they're being investigated in another state for negligent practices, for allowing abuse, neglect, exploitation, bed sores, wounds, financial problems. So we think there's some opportunity there for our state to improve there too. Said I'd touch on the KDAD surveyors. I know that several of the committees I have spoken to, Bethel Committee, Health and Human Services, this isn't a new topic, and I understand that many people are frustrated with it, as we are, because it's really hard to look those residents in the eyes and say, hey, this has to get reported to KDADs, you know, they're the authoritative figure here, and then to know that it might or might not get investigated. You know, when your life is in those four walls, 19 months for something to get addressed, it might feel like that is their whole world at that time. And the triage system, I understand there's got to be a triage system, but we come in quarterly into these homes. We do what's called routine access visits so that we are constantly there, offer our services, offer our support, offer our assistance, but there's some things that are outside of our jurisdiction and ability to be able to resolve, and that's really where the resolution has to come from KDADs. We had talked, and there's been language conversations about expanding those individuals and their scopes to be able to make a more collaborative team. We would really like to see that, but at the bottom line, we really hope that some things can be done to kind of get that back on track and get it closer to that 12-month window that it really should be, and that complaints can be, you know, addressed a lot quicker. This is one, and this is where I say timeline of legislation is a little bit past. I did introduce a bill that centered around pharmacy provider of choice, and what kind of brought this about, and I have a sample letter here on this next slide. We had individuals contacting us that the homes that they were residing in were charging them anywhere from $150 a month to $300 a month if they used a pharmacy that was not the home's contracted pharmacy provider. So stating that it would be like an administrative setup fee, a pharmacy provider fee, a pharmacy setup fee, stating that, it takes more time or there's different packaging. Well, the problem you run into, we had a lot of individuals that were veterans. They get their meds paid for by the VA. Okay, the VA does not bubble pack. The VA says, here's this pill bottle, here's this pill bottle, and you have to set it up and administer it appropriately there. And while they were getting their medications for free, they're really not, because then the home was charging that $150 to $300 range. This is throughout the state. This isn't centralized to one area. It's all throughout. So this bill did have a hearing. It was not worked. There were some concerns from the provider associations. So we're taking that offline, I guess, after the session to try and work through if there's resolutions for language. It's not one I'm looking to stop working on, just very proactively telling you, because I don't see how it makes sense for a home to be providing, for a home who provided these services to be charging $150 to $300 a month. All right, and then I believe my last one here is the personal needs allowance. So for anyone that lives in a nursing facility, skilled nursing facility, long-term care, and they're on Medicaid, they get $62 a month for personal needs. So yes, your food, your shelter, that's provided, but this is for haircuts, razors, if you wanted certain types of adult incontinence products because the one that the home provides isn't the right type for you. If you, want to have a Coke versus, the Sam's Choice that maybe the home provides. I know some of us are very stickler on our brands. You have $62 a month. I'm not looking at anybody. I'll let you call yourself out. But you have $62 a month to be able to purchase that. And so it's not a lot. We have residents and resident councils that have voiced that concern to us and have advocated. There was a bill introduction, I believe, by Representative McDonald that introduced $85, I believe, to increase that to. We asked for 72, currently 62. We asked that based on the national average. This is a chart in there so you can see where other states are at, where we compare. That was our ask. Yeah, we'll see where that one goes and see if we can continue to do that. But this is from a resident council down in Wathena that just thanked us and appreciated that effort and really hope to see that we can have some resolution there. And then this one's Overland Park area also. So with that, I know I touched on a lot of information, and I really do appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak with you about so many of these things. I'm happy to stand for questions at the appropriate time and bring any resources back that I can answer.
All right, also. And thank you, Haley, for your presentation. First, I wanted to go back to, did you say that there were 7 closures or terminations in the last year? Mm-hmm. Is that correct?
Yes.
So in regards to the entire system, how does that affect other either nursing care facilities or assisted living centers when there's 7 closures in 1 year? Mm-hmm.
So what happens is it is a chaotic traumatic event. Lack of better terms, that's really what it is. Because when a home closes, it is a frenzy for where's an open bed, where's their availability at, where can we get to, we want them close to home, One of them we had was in Emporia, and it was a very sizable home, had different levels of services. So you have to then find in a very quick, it's first come, first serve basis, you have to find other placement for your individuals, but you also have to find to make sure that they can provide that level of care. And then you have to have a home accept you. So there's a process of, sending documents, having this individual assessed, making sure they accept their payer source. Are they Medicaid? Is it private pay? So there's a lot there. But then you have the staff aspect too, that then, it affects your communities too. You might have people that then relocate out of the community that they lived in because that was their providers. I know I'm picking on Emporia again, but at that same time that the nursing facility closed, they also had the Tyson plant close. So we had, when we were in there trying to help residents, we were also consoling staff because they're like, my husband just lost his job the other day and now I've lost mine. I'm not sure what I'm going to do. So it's hard there, but then it puts an influx on these other homes too to provide. And for a lot of these residents, they don't exactly have the luxury of being able to reside in the same town that they were. So then you have people that are displaced and their family members then have to drive, much farther distance to see them and visit them. And sometimes that isn't able to happen either.
Well, in your response, you actually kind of alluded to my next question. I handle and manage the finances for my grandmother and also my great aunt, both of which are in, my great aunt is in a nursing home and my grandmother is in assisted living. And both are private pay. And one thing that we have noticed, because my father is the power of attorney for both, and when my grandmother goes to the hospital, because that's where the nursing care facility that my great aunt is at, they're always trying to recruit her to come and stay in the nursing care facility as opposed to the assisted living, because my opinion is because she's private pay and she can offset the amount that is not received from those that receive Medicaid. Mm-hmm. On the same note, after the pandemic, the assisted living center that my grandmother is at began accepting Medicaid individuals, and her rent has starkly increased over the last few years. And again, I allude that to they're trying to offset the loss in regards to those that are accepting the Medicaid patients and shifting that to the private pay. Am I correct in my analysis?
I would say I would agree with your analysis based on my experience. I would also, to further support that, in my tenure of experience, I was a nursing facility provider for 15 years prior to coming into this realm, so I lived it also. The population has absolutely shifted. I remember, back in the day where it was like a 50-50 mix. At 50% of your population was private pay, 50% was Medicaid. I'm sorry, it used to be 80-20. 80% was private pay, 20% was Medicaid. That's massively shifted now, I believe, to closer to what we're seeing as 50-50. And sometimes we had a closure of a facility here in Topeka, right on Wanamaker, and they had about 100 individuals, and I want to say 10 were private pay, and the rest were all Medicaid. So yes, we have seen those same experiences where in order to offset, we're seeing the rent increase, and those are sort of things that we're contacted about too by residents, and there's not really a lot we can do. We can't tell a nursing home what they can and can't charge for private pay.
Well, and that's one thing that, when my grandmother moved into the assisted living center in 2020, right in the midst of the pandemic, it was actually September of 2020, her rent was about $3,500 a month. And just earlier this month, I wrote a check for $6,500 for her assisted living care. The next question I have, and this is actually in regards to my great aunt, because she has Plan D with Medicare, and it's in regards to our local pharmacies. And we were notified in December that she has Humana as a partner in regards to her pharmaceuticals. And they had told us that the only pharmacy that they would be using is CVS and would not be able to use a local pharmacy. This really hurts local and rural pharmacies throughout not only the state of Kansas, but across the nation. When we have Medicare depicting and saying you're only going to be using this particular nationwide chain and not your local pharmacist, it actually impedes on, one, your local economy, and two, the access to get pharmaceuticals. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know if you have a response to that, but I think it's just a very terrible idea, especially for our local pharmacists in especially rural Kansas.
My response would be exactly, which is why I was working for this bill, because like I said, it does hurt those local pharmacies when, I know several people I've talked to, grandpa has always used a local pharmacy. This is so many generations, sort of thing. It hurts the local economies. And also, like I said, veterans, we have that's a huge population that it's impacting. We also have had some residents that are getting medication directly from the manufacturers at a much steeper discounted price because it's very expensive. And they get that steep discount, but then this is layered on top of it. So, it really bites over here and it bites over here. So we don't see how the home charging that administrative setup fee, what have you, benefits the resident. We see that it does more harm than good, so which is why we're trying to advocate for that.
All right, thank you. Vice Chair Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, I want to hit on that as well. And you mentioned it on page 19 and page 20. And so I think it would be correct that regardless if the individual is private pay or Medicaid, if they're 65 and older, their pharmacy plan is on Medicare, even if they're private pay for their stay in the nursing home, correct?
Yes, but what I would add is that the Medicaid residents are not allowed to be charged this rate, so it is only private pay individuals that are being charged.
Sure, but private pay using federal money for Medicare, correct?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Okay, is there anything the state of Kansas can do on that line item? Because if you look on page 20, this preferred pharmacy, this is where the corruption is. This is rebates that are going from the manufacturer back to the PBM or the insurance company, PBM, and they're pocketing it, and it's costing our constituency a lot of money, which actually costs us a lot of money because they're on Medicare. Yeah, if they're private pay, and this is ridiculous, and I'm so glad that we have limits on the Medicaid side, but I want to know how we can stop this because this is corrupt.
I agree. There's no law and rules in our state currently saying that it can't be charged. I mean, that's based on everything that we have looked at. That's what we've ran into, which is why we propose the legislation.
This is blatant corruption, Mr. Chair.
I couldn't agree more. Representative Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I know I've had conversations with my pharmacy locally, and luckily the two nursing homes that are in the community work with them to kind of make sure that they get the right, supplemental insurance, because if they lost those two contracts, they would probably have to close, just simply because that is a huge part of their of what they do. So, and that would be a huge detriment to the community. I wanted to go back to you were talking about the involuntary discharges, and so right now, let me understand. Right now, the 292 nursing facilities, they do report involuntary. Do they report those to KDADs?
Yes, so the process for the nursing facility side is that they are required to send that notice of involuntary discharge to the resident's surrogate decision maker, KDADs, and our office when it is issued.
Oh,
and then they have a 30-day, they're supposed to have up to 30 days unless they claim a need for an emergency discharge. We run into that sometimes too, where they claim that the resident is a danger to themselves or to other residents.
Okay, and then the 538, they don't have to report that to KDADs or to you?
I believe they send that to KDADs, but not to our office.
Okay, so what does your office do if you see that?
So the way that we're contacted on those is normally with a resident.
Well, no. I mean, if you, on the nursing home side, what does your office do if they're reporting them to you, so what does your office do?
We do review the discharge notice to make sure if there's anything missed in there, that they did not provide accurate information, appeal notices, different resources there. We inform them, hey, this needs corrected, and technically the date should restart for that discharge. But oftentimes we'll reach out to that resident and just say, hey, we received a notice. Are you wanting to, try and stay here? Are you wanting to contest this? Are you wanting to move to another place? Would you like our assistance? Would you not? And then based on that, we then either step in and the resident's like, yes, I really don't want to move. That's a traumatic situation. We need resolution here. Here's the underlying problem. And then we try to go to resolve that. Or they say, no, I want to get out of here. And then we help coordinate to ensure that the transfer is done appropriately, resources are set up appropriately, because then, federally, CMS looks to on safe transfer and discharges to make sure that no adverse event occurs. Like I said, the example with oxygen set up, medications transferred, we've ran into that before too, where the facility that they're leaving from doesn't want to send medications with them, things like that.
Okay, so how many people do you have in your office?
There's 12 of us.
Okay, so, I guess, looking at this one thing, that's over doubling the number of nursing, or the number of facilities. So what would that do to your numbers in your office?
So we are already, funding-wise, we already do have some allocations to be able to expand, and we are actively looking to do that primarily, like I said, in that Johnson, Wyandotte County area, Sedgwick County area. Those are just populations much higher there. We try to meet federal recommendations. It's not in statute yet, is one ombudsman to 2,000 residents. So that's what we try to aim for. But I will say on those state licensed only homes, we already do have some that are contacting us. So we are already working some of those, but not all of them. But yes, we did recently hire an administrative assistant in our office that would be taking on the majority of the intake for that and then dispersing it out to our regionals.
But if those were added, you would have to add more people.
Yes, which we already plan to do.
Okay, well, you don't need them if you don't, you don't need to add more people if you don't have them.
We see that based on the numbers and the trends already in areas, we do need to expand already.
Okay. Well, I guess I'm a little, I don't totally understand, but why doesn't KDADs aren't they supposed to be helping the residents also?
They don't.
They get the information, what do they do with it?
They get the information, and unless there is non-compliance, they don't work to help resolve that situation. They don't step in and ensure, the safe transfer. It might be something that they look at that next annual survey complaint. If someone calls it in that this isn't being done right, it's based on their triage system and then their annual reviews.
How
so
many
they
people
don't
do
come in
they
to
have
resolve.
working on it?
That's a great question. I would absolutely defer to them.
Okay, well, maybe that's a question. Sounds like maybe they need less people and you need more. But anyway, all right, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Committee, we did hear that bill, and in true legislative fashion, when you open up that can of worms, it gets a lot more complicated than, and I think you would agree with that, Haley. So I think what we've left it at is a negotiate. You guys are working on that. Is that correct?
Yes, we have plans to be working the provider associations that were opponents of this had brought about concerns of regulatory compliance, which we didn't see where that fit, but they felt that they had reasons to be concerned about that. So yes, the intent is to discuss that and resume it here this next session or even interim.
So we are on this right now. It's more of a trying to work out an agreement between the parties. Would that be accurate?
Yes, that is the intent, and that is what will be pursued.
So I don't want
it will not die.
I don't want anybody to think that this just came up. But you know how it is in politics. You open up a can of worms and there's all kinds of things. So we are working on that. A couple of things I wanted to visit with you about the 19 months. Now, just to be clear, that's federal folks anyway. So you might explain the difference between state and federal, just so to give context here.
Yes, so
Haley.
my understanding, and I don't want to misspeak for KDAD, so I will preface with that. My understanding is last conversation with them on those federal, the long-term care nursing facilities, they are averaging the 19 months for their annual inspections. And I believe that last I spoke with Lacey at KDAD's, she has stated that the state licensed only homes are hitting their average target of 12 months. But I will say, you're talking about a huge plethora of difference of regulations. The long-term care side has much more than the state licensed only.
Representative Carpenter?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just for context on that, the other thing is, and I want to bring this to Representative Helgerson's attention, what's the fiscal note on raising that from 62 to 72?
Haley?
Yes. So our understanding based on those numbers, it's about, just to go from the 62 to 72 is about 1.2 million.
So, Representative Helgerson, we did not propose that in the budget, and there was a $1.1 million fiscal note to that. That's why we didn't propose that. So, anyway, just wanted to clear that up. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Steele?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Haley, for being here. Previously, there's been a couple things about the federal and the state level, and if you could maybe explain why we have a state level but why they aren't federal level, because I think that's really important in the amount of regulations that they have.
Yeah, so thank you for the question. On your federal level, that is where you will have individuals that their room and board can potentially be paid for by Medicare. So those skilled services, getting therapy, getting occupational therapy, physical therapy, respiratory therapy, different types of therapies, nursing, skilled services that require skilled staff to provide those. So those are oftentimes your much higher level of care there, and based on Medicare paying for some of that room and board, there's a whole other level of regulations and requirements in there. On the state licensed only, yes, they absolutely don't match. This is nothing more than my personal opinion, so take that for what it's worth. I believe that's why we're seeing the influx of the state licensed only homes versus the decrease in the nursing facility population, because there's a lot less regulations to be held accountable to. I mean, would I like to see some of those matched? Yes. Will I also be fought on that? Absolutely. But that's really kind of where those variances really differ. And oftentimes, that's really hard because you can have a resident or their family member not understand, well, over this house over here on this side of the street has these requirements, and this one over here has totally different ones. I might get the same level of care because often they can. You know, they can bring in, on the state licensed only homes, they can bring in additional supports to provide the same level of care. It's not that you have really, really high level of needs over on the nursing homes and not over on the state licensed only. It can be the same. It's just where the red tape lies.
Mrs. Steele?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for that, because that explains why the proviso on the involuntary discharges is so crucial, because we're going to be able to capture this state now as well as the level. Is that correct?
Yes, that's the intended purpose, and also, like I stated, to try to help intervene for that on behalf of that resident and help them not go through a move and transition. Because one thing I did not point out is on those 7 moves, those 7 closures that occurred, there are statistics that show a mortality rate does follow after a transfer. And in our experience, it's been about 10% of the population in a closure after their move will pass within at least the first year, if not sooner.
Representative Steele?
Mr. Chair, I just have one more question. On page 12, you have the oranges fully or partially resolved. Could you just provide an example of maybe, like, why do we not divide that differently?
Haley?
Than have just fully and just partial?
Yeah. So in that, we take our guidance federally from the ACL on how we categorize things, so that's kind of how that's divided up there. But fully or partially resolved, I will give an experience, and it's one that I just talked to Representative about this last week. We had a constituent contact their office saying that this person is looking to be discharged in a very short amount of time, and the problem is that an assessment was done for their needs, but then one of the agencies lost the assessment, and without that assessment, they cannot get approved for Medicaid and HCBS services that they need to be able to move to this other home. This other home's willing to accept them, but they can't go in without this approved. So we were able to work with that individual with their power of attorney, contacted the agency. They worked great with us, and I said, here's the case number. What's going on here, and within a matter of 24 hours, they had it resolved. That person was approved, and that person was able to move within a few days.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, real quick, we have 3 more people, and then we need to move on to the next item on the agenda. So Representative Helgerson.
First, let me just say thank you very much for all the help that you've given to me, but also the individuals in this state.
Thank you.
And a clarification on the personal needs. You initially, I thought I heard you say 52, but it's actually 62, and you wanted to move it to 72, which, as the chairman mentioned, it'll cost $1.1 million, rounding errors for them. Let me go back to the important question. It's been a while since I worked on the reimbursement for nursing homes, but aren't there 4 or 5 factors that are used in combination to decide what reimbursement we pay to nursing homes?
That is a question I would absolutely have to research and get back to you. I know that the calculation formulary had recently changed from what I was used to. I know that there was an interim committee, I believe, this last year that looked at that too. So I do not want to misspeak on that, but I understand there are obviously factors that determine their reimbursement rate.
And the reason I'm raising the question, if I'm an owner of a nursing home and also the owner of the property and also owner of the pharmacy and some other things, I could in some ways manipulate the costs of the nursing homes in a favorable or an unfavorable way in order to get a better reimbursement. I don't know if that's at all true, and maybe the chairman could answer that, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's a case mix index is what it's called, and it's a measure of how difficult your folks are to take care of. So, you know, you may have a case index of, I think it's like 50 to 200, you know, two. And so if you have 50 residents that are able to take care of themselves or not, you know, totally invalid or whatever, your index is lower, so you get reimbursed less because you have less difficult folks to take care of. And so that's a survey that they do of each individual over time. They measure what they need for care. And so that's how you get paid. You get paid more if you have a more complicated folks involved. You get paid more because obviously it takes more time and more care. So that's what that is.
If I may,
Yes,
I
Haley.
can expand upon that because I think to where you're heading with this, and this is what we're seeing, is that if you do have, just say for this example, a physical therapy company that is also the same owner, you know, across curtains, the same owner owns the physical therapy company that also owns the operations. The physical therapy company can charge what the rate that they want to set based on their contract with that provider for their services. Now, there is supposed to be allowable cost. That doesn't mean that they have to charge that rate. They can charge above and beyond. So yes, they can charge those rates over here as the pharmacy provider to the owner, and then that all does go into cost reporting, case mix index, to state, oh, our fees are this, our costs of operation are this, our costs of operation are higher, and that helps set going in with the case mix index too for their entire cost report. So yes, there are some ways that that occurs, and that's what we are concerned about.
We need to move on so we can get to our next item. Representative Bueller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Haley brought up on slide 18, it's the challenges, the KDAD surveyor staff. We are pushing that through the Bethel Committee, and we did very much in social services budget. What we're trying to do here is we're trying to encourage two things. Number one is to get beyond what they've defined as the model for what those KDAD surveyor staff teams are. Because we're stuck. We're stuck as a state, and that's why we're 19 months behind. The second thing that we're pushing really hard, I'm pushing really hard for, is to consider contract staffing to do that. And KDADS, I think, has heard that message, and I would be hopefully pleased next year to report progress in this regard, because it is something we need to fix. And I don't know, Haley, if you have anything to add to that from your point of view.
Haley.
Yeah, I would just agree with you. I mean, as you stated, as several of you that I come before in the health committees, this isn't new. I understand that you guys are familiar with this, and I would say too, I know that the state has previously used contracted surveyors before to catch up several years back when we were close to 24 months, and I do believe that that resolved. So I think it's something to pursue once again.
And lastly, Representative Ballard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, Representative Bueller asked one of the questions that I was just going to touch on, but I want to go to slide 20 just briefly about this $150 monthly service charge. I mean, this one right here really disturbs me. But when we look at it, this service charge accounts for the additional time and resources required for our staff to process medications from non-preferred, which is real, that tells you exactly what the problem is, helps ensure compliance with packaging and everything else. So if you're in a nursing home, but you're very able-minded in your mind, is fine. Can you not give yourself your own medicine, or do they say they have to dispense the medicine?
There are requirements for federal regulation. It depends, again, on your provider type. So there are regulations, and there's also assessments that need to occur for your medication. Some individuals can have lock boxes of medications in their room. We have seen that. I don't know if the homes are abiding by that in this sort of situation or not, or if they're still saying wherever it's coming from, regardless of who dispenses it, if they're being charged. I haven't asked to that level of depth.
Well, I'm not going to take any more time on that, but to me, it's certainly not worth 150, but the problem is when you see non-preferred providers and you go through, if you're able to dispense your own medicine, then that's one thing. If you need to have that much time and a nurse to come by and dispense it, that's really another issue. But to say, I guess what I just want to know is, can you give yourself your own medicine if you are able-minded and bodied, or is it upfront when you come into this nursing home that all medicines will be dispensed by staff?
In a nursing home setting, if an individual is assessed to be able to safely and competently administer themselves, they are able to, yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, so we can move on. Thank you, Haley, for being here and giving us an update. We're going to go ahead and move on to the next item on the agenda, and that is going to be Ryan Vincent, the Executive Director of the Kansas Housing Resources Corporation, and giving us an annual report for 2025. Mr. Vincent.
Let's try that. Thanks so much for this opportunity. We're getting our slides up and running here. And you all cover so many different subject areas that we really appreciate this time to talk some housing here. And I do appreciate the little bit of Swedish that I learned this morning. Mr. Chairman, how much time do I have?
I'd say about 15, 20 minutes.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. Well, I am before this committee regularly. I know I work with all of you and your various housing needs with your constituents, so we will just jump right into the presentation. I do want to draw your attention to the folder that you have before you with various reports on KHRC, some fact sheets that are available. So let me get this going. I'm having a hard time getting it. Does it? Hey, there we go. All right, just a quick update or agenda. I want to briefly talk about KHRC, who we are, what we do, but I want to spend most of the time just giving you an update on the progress we've made administering the housing investments that you have generously provided KHRC and our stakeholders the last couple of years. As just a reminder of who KHRC is, we've been around for over 20 years. We're a self-supporting nonprofit public corporation. Our mission is simple. We help Kansans access the safe, affordable housing they need with the dignity they deserve. I do always like to remind the legislators, our policymakers, that KHRC is transparent, we're accountable. We submit annual reports to the legislature. Our board of directors is appointed by the governor and confirmed by the Senate. Our financials are wrapped up into the state's financial system. And of course, we are audited regularly, whether it's at the state level, whether it's at the federal. So it's just always a nice reminder for you as stewards of the government funds. You all, whether you are in rural Kansas, whether you represent urban areas, whether you are east, west, south, or north, I know that housing is one of the key issues you hear about from your constituents. We hear about it all the time. The needs are vast around our state. I do always like to remind you that we administer a variety of different housing programs at all levels, from providing a physical shelter for individuals experiencing homelessness to tenant-based rental assistance. We fund community action agencies, and then a variety of our programs that I'm going to spend most of my time talking about today are in the housing development realm. And then, of course, we also have a down payment assistance program. KHRC provides federally funded weatherization services. And then, of course, we have a healthy compliance department, because compliance is so important to ensure that the funds are being well spent, that the developments are being well built, and that we're serving the individuals and the taxpayers well. So don't hesitate to reach out to us with your constituent concerns. So let me take you back in history very quickly. KHRC worked with a variety of different housing programs at the peak of the pandemic a few years ago. We administered coordinated the first statewide housing needs assessment in almost 30 years. That involved listening sessions and surveys all over the state, and that study was released in December of 2021. While that study is getting a bit older, it is still very relevant, and there is area on your particular communities that I want to make sure that you check out as you have time. It's available on our website. I'm sorry, the slide's a little fuzzy for some reason, but this is just a little pictorial that just in our rural communities around the state, the study estimated that we require between 3,800 and 4,800 homes per year just to stay up with the level of homes that are needed in our rural communities. That doesn't include our urban areas. So just the city of Topeka, as an example, has a study saying that they need between 700 and 900 homes per year. Extrapolate that for Wichita, for Johnson County, for our other urban areas, and our housing needs are vast, whatever area of the state you represent. So let's talk about affordability, because that's a big buzzword these days, but it's very real. The costs of housing continue to escalate. And why is that? Well, there's rising interest rates, rising mortgage rates. There are rising construction costs, limited supply. Of course, our housing stock is aging. Our wages are simply not keeping up with the rising costs. And what we see is a lot of financing gaps, whether that's for single family, whether that's for multifamily, whether it's for rental or home ownership. Just as an example from our moderate income housing program of what we've seen the cost just in the last 10 years per unit nearly double. That's just the reality of the times with escalating costs. And that's the challenge that we are seeing from the development side, but you all are seeing from your constituents, and that we're all working together to try to address. So as far as what the state has been able to do through your investments, after that statewide housing study was released in 2021, you all passed historic investments in housing through KHRC and our partners. $62 million in various moderate income housing resources. We also had 2 new tax bills passed, the Affordable Housing Tax Credit and the Housing Investor Tax Credit. There was a new Rural Home Loan Guarantee Program passed. And then in 23 and 24, there was some supplement tranches of funds that you all generously provided and have already been put out as investments around the state. Last year, one of the big subjects of conversation was the fiscal cost versus the economic benefit of the Kansas Affordable Housing Tax Credit. That eventually had lots of committee time with Chairman Tarwater and many of you in various committee meetings. and the legislature compromised on some caps for that program. So those have been put in effect since last year. They have dramatically limited the fiscal cost, but they've also dramatically limited our future ability to bring more homes online. So that's kind of the recap of the last 4 years. I want to take a few minutes now and really dive into, though, our specific programs that we administer that are funded by you all at the state. So the last 4 years since those investments have come online, we've been able to fund 9,600 homes. That's huge. That's huge investment in your communities. And I can look around this room and talk about different properties in just about every one of your districts that have been funded by those. The breakdown of those different program sources are listed there. So I will start with kind of a map just showing you both the urban and rural areas that we've been able to make these investments these last couple of years in counties that haven't seen new housing built in generations. And that's exciting to see, particularly in my 20-plus years at Kansas Housing. So starting with the moderate income housing program, that program recognizes that there's a big group of people that make too much to qualify for the affordable programs funded by the federal government, but they simply don't make enough to meet market needs. These are our teachers, our firefighters, our folks that we need for our communities to be successful and are vital constituents for you all. Through this program, though, the Moderate Income Housing Program, we've been able to finance incredible investment around the state. We still are seeing $4 nearly for every $1 of resource that we have historically. But we've been able to award $70 million around the state through your investment. We are able to leverage $6 for every $1 in state funds. And that's really incredible return on an investment that hopefully you're seeing multiplied throughout your economy. There's a breakdown of kind of our rental versus homeownership. Both types of housing are very much needed across our state and in your districts. Here's a quick little catch up on where we're at with the moderate income housing. We have now awarded 100% of the funds that you have provided us. I will add that just in committee a week or two ago that you all added an additional $12.5 million that passed out of committee from the budget for the upcoming fiscal year, for which we and our stakeholders are very grateful. Over 88% of the construction on these different developments are already underway, and we just made our last award I guess it was February 6th, over $6 million in our remaining moderate income housing funds and $7 million in the Kansas Housing Investor Tax Credit. All right, and here is just kind of a historical graph showing you the demand. It's showing you the amount that we've been able to award and the number of homes. I know that's hard to read, but it's in your materials. And I'd very much recommend that you look at this MIH fact sheet, which is in your materials as you have time, because it really shows what we're able to do around the state in some very rural communities. Continuing on, though, just for the sake of time, I do want to just give a couple success stories. In, I guess, Representative Raj's district, we were just in Victoria here not too long ago for a conversion of a historic retirement home. This is a long-term property that was sitting dilapidated in a lovely urban community, or rural community. KHRC, through both our moderate income housing and our Kansas Housing Investor Tax Credit, were able to rehab these into beautiful apartments for our seniors. It allowed their homes to then be freed up for single-family housing for families. But what I love about it is it's truly organically developed. It's not only essential housing for seniors, but there's going to be a community center there. There's a child care center in the works that are going to be there to be able to work with the seniors. And even the local history museum has relocated. So these are the things that housing investment can capture and can connect. Moving down the road in Kansas, we're moving to Fowler now, where you're seeing 3 single-family homes, 3-bedroom, 2-bath. They all have unfinished basements and a single-car garage. Through some MIH and some Kansas Housing Investor Tax Credit, we've been able to build this essential housing in Fowler. And my third example is in Dodge City. This is probably our biggest development funded through the Moderate Income Housing Program, but we've got over 200 homes coming online everything from townhomes to single-family to barn dominiums. I can never say the word. This is moderate income, which represents an essential need there in the community of Dodge City, with the Homer Cheese Factory, with the dairies providing the supplies. So we're thrilled to bring that online. We also partner with Dodge City Community College students so that we're able to give them job training. We know that there's such a shortage in the trades, and we're grateful to be able to use these state investments to not only finance the essential housing, but our housers of tomorrow. Oops. Just continuing on, I do want to point out that you also have funded some revolving loan dollars that KHRC has been able to put into use. It was a little bit slow to get going 2 years ago because of some legislative technicalities, but we were able to get that fixed a year ago. And with that, while we had $30 million in August, by August of next year, we anticipate those funds being fully deployed. So that's able to supplement some of the different programs that you're hearing about today. So let's shift gears now. We recognize that there's a huge amount of need on the moderate income housing side around the state, but there's also a huge amount of need on the lower income. Even with the federal resources, we know that we're only able to do so much and unlock so many homes. But because of your investment through the Kansas Affordable Housing Tax Credit, we've been able to nearly triple our development in that important program. The last couple of years, we've been able to do between 1,500 and 2,500 homes around the state in urban and rural areas alike. Here's a nice example from Russell. Mr. Chairman was at, I believe that was just a week ago, wasn't it? The time all kind of flies together, but we were able to celebrate the new building in Russell, the Flintwood Senior Housing. This is 24 units, 12 duplexes, 2-bedroom, 1-bath, residence for persons ages 55 and above. Again, this is allowing accessible, safe, affordable housing for our seniors, but it's also freeing up some of our single-family homes for our families. It's a huge investment in the community of Russell, where we also have a moderate income development underway, just as an example of the impact that we have around the state. So that was a pretty quick overview of a lot of different programs and a lot of different resources. I know time is limited. My contact information is up there, but I'm happy to field any questions, Mr. Chairman, as you and the committee have.
All right, and thank you for being here, Ryan. And you know, actually, that ribbon cutting was on Friday, and actually, I was pleasantly surprised about how many people we had came out for that ribbon cutting. We had about 100 people.
We were
from the
all in
Russell.
one little community room with some
Yeah, it was
cold weather,
packed.
weren't we? Yeah.
Representative Mosier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your presentation. A couple of questions I'm asking on behalf of Representative Estes. How many in rough numbers do you have? How many vacant infill lots are there in rural communities that have housing shortages?
I appreciate that question, and I don't have that data available. That is some stuff that is something available from our statewide housing needs assessment, though, which was released in December 21. So there may be some lag in getting that information. But you identify, there is a lot of vacant infill housing in our rural communities and also in our urban areas. And that's something that we have been able to tackle primarily through the moderate income housing program. That resource can be used for, in concert with others, for everything from demo to rehab to new build. We can do single family, we can do multifamily, we can do. The beauty of the moderate income housing program specifically is that it's responsive to what the community needs. So rather than us at the state level telling the community what housing they need, like the old days with some of the HUD-built housing, we're able to have the communities will apply to us and they identify what their top housing needs are. And because of that, we're able to do upper story housing rehab, we're able to do infill. So I can give you examples from all over the state, rural and urban areas alike, through what we're able to achieve both in our MIH and some of the affordable housing programs.
Thank you. One more.
Representative Mosier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So has there been any effort to leverage those lots to bring in modular homes for people? I mean, that would save stick-builts and, you know, would also provide the modular housing jobs, those kind of things, and people could have a house right now?
Yeah, excellent question, and it really brings up the reality that not only is our housing need vast in every area of the state, but we have to be open to various housing solutions, and we are. Because of that, our programs, whether it's MIH, whether it's the tax credit, you know, we work with different types of housing products, including modular housing, manufactured housing. You know, we're able to work with different suppliers. I know that recently some committees, I believe just a couple days ago, heard some testimony from an initiative in Wichita with a manufactured housing manufacturer that maybe is in the process of relocating. But our programs are eligible for those various products. It's a developer-driven process, so while we can incentivize and encourage different types of developments, we want to make sure that we're not limiting it to any one product, any one type, because the needs are vast.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Two quick questions. So you talk about investment. So are you able to give us like an annual or even a 5-year investment total in terms of federal dollars and state dollars used for the various programs for affordable housing?
Ryan.
We do have the data available for the dollars spent. As far as what we'd like to have is a better analysis of the return on investment, because we all know that when you invest in housing, you know, not only are you hiring people, not only are you paying income and sales and property taxes, but your employment can multiply. You're able to recruit and retain more workers. The economic impact can be felt in downtown. It can be felt in, you know, the ability to save various social costs. So while we have a lot of the data on what is going in, you know, we would like to have more return on investment data available.
Vice Chair Williams.
Yes, thank you. So I'm really looking for the fiscal impact. So I'm really looking for the inputs on the federal and the state, that type of commitment. We can do the ROI many different ways and calculate that. But I'm looking for the fiscal impact. There is a requested legislative post audit for one of those types of studies. But if you have that already, that would be ideal. And whoops, again, it's the annual expenditure for state, federal for these. And it's also kind of looking at it over a period of time. And my last very quick question, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Yes, and basically the question is, you talked about how the cost of housing continues to rise. But I want you to make a case for why my comment isn't true, and that is that, for example, some of these programs like LIHTC actually drive prices up because, and I'll cite the example of LIHTC, where it was calculated last year that one door, not a house, one door with all the incentives added is $220,000 of state and federal investment versus a house that could be built by Habitat for Humanity for $120,000, and the keys could be turned over to the individual or they could take on the payment. So I guess I want you to respond to the cost continues to increase, but I'm going to argue that these incentives are part of the problem.
Ryan.
Well, you know, that's certainly a policy discussion, Representative, and I respect your question. I think that the reality is that the supply of housing is so low that it's hard to believe that some relatively nominal investments in the overall housing stock are going to drive the costs up. If anything, if we're able to build more supply, then it should actually lower the cost of housing for whether it's single family or whether it's rental. Now, does tax credit housing cost a lot of money? Yes. And the reason for that is that it is serving very low income individuals, that we're covering about 70% of the cost of that development, because for the next 30, 40 years, that apartment has to rent hundreds of dollars below market rate and serve very low income individuals and stay in good condition so that we're not before you all explaining why a property isn't built well or isn't maintained well. So it's expensive, but housing's expensive and it's an investment. And it's an investment whether you're building it for low income individuals or whether you're building it for moderate income. So we try to balance that to ensure that we're looking at competitive applications, that we have a transparent process, but we ultimately want to make sure that we're increasing the housing supply to bring those costs down.
All right, and thank you, Ryan, for being here.
Thank you.
And giving us an update on housing. Okay, so committee, real quick, as we still have a quorum, we're going to move on to the final action on House Bill 2513. So I would entertain a motion to have final action on House Bill 2513. Vice Chair Williams.
Yes, Mr. Chair. I move that we pass out favorably House Bill 2427.
2513.
Oh, second.
2513.
Yeah.
Okay, I got the wrong bill here. All right.
All right, you've heard the motion to favorably pass out 2513, seconded by Representative Ballard. Is there any discussion? Of course, this is the claims against the state bill. All right, seeing none, Vice Chair Williams.
Mr. Chair, I close.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, motion passes. All right, so we are not scheduled to have a meeting either Friday or Monday. So we are adjourned until Tuesday morning, but I would also like to, I should have done this in the beginning, and welcome Representative Hsu for filling in Appropriations this morning. So committee, we are adjourned.